Hi everyone, and welcome back to Founder Sessions. Joining me today is Josef Wasinski. Josef, welcome to the podcast. Pleasure to have you on. How are you doing?
I'm really good. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
We've been hit with COVID. We've had to cancel because of family stuff, but we finally got together to do this podcast. It took a while, but we're here.
Well, like any good entrepreneur, you make it happen eventually, right?
That's very true. Very true. And Josef, let's just dive right in. Tell us a bit about yourself. Tell us about your background, and we'll go from there.
I'd like to say I've been an entrepreneur my whole life, but I don't necessarily like the definition of what people normally think of as an entrepreneur. Like the dictionary has it as those who take financial risks in the hope of profit. And actually, for me, it's not about that. It's kind of about building things, and I like to call it seeing the matrix. For me, seeing the matrix is like working out how a system has a gap that no one else sees, and the joy of the discovery and working out whether that's true. And the best example that I can think of, I think I was like 10 or 11 on a school trip to France back when they still had francs. And remember my dad gave me some francs and like a little slip he'd got from the Forex, the money exchange place, saying how much they'd buy the francs for when I came back in the week. And so we went out there, went on the school trip, but the teachers left everyone, all the kids' money in the one day we could have gone out to town and spent it. So I came back and I had all these francs, but I also had some pounds with me because I was actually prepared. And we're on the ferry back. And on the ferry, there was a money exchange place. And I saw the rate on the ferry. And obviously, it was a ridiculous rate. It's on the ferry. And they know they can price gouge you. But there was this kid there who I was like, hey, you see the rate up there? I will buy your francs off you for better than the rate that's on the board. And he was like, yeah, sure. And like, this was a really smart guy. Like, he went on to do maths at Oxford, like really switched on guy. And because the thing I realized, I saw that the number on this bit of paper that I could get here was better than this one, on the ferry. And it was the joy of working that out and seeing if it worked, and then going home to dad and like, I've got all of this money. Can you give it back to me? He's like, you're the only kid that I would know that would go on a holiday and come back with more money than they left with. And the thing is, it wasn't the profit; it was the seeing the gap that no one else saw. And so it's like part of it's that kind of understanding the world and how it works. The other start is just building things. Like I just really enjoyed the act of creation. Whether that's pushing pixels to make a deck look good, or sitting there and downing too many energy drinks and coding for a day, or working out how to make a system better. Like, yeah, it's the combination of those two things. Kind of why I've been an entrepreneur for basically my whole life, ever since I had the ability to kind of do things. I built my first website when I was 13, that kind of stuff.
I hear a lot that people love the building process.
And
when it becomes less about building and it's more about, managing a team and things like that, it becomes less exciting for them because they like those long hours, hard work, and things breaking on them. Whereas if everything's in place and nothing's breaking, it's like, what am I doing here?
There's a lack of stories around entrepreneurs who have that self-awareness, because everyone loves the story of the Steve Jobs, the Jeff Bezos, the Elon Musk, who takes something from an idea through to a massive public company. But they are the exception. The vast majority of people are really good at starting a business. And actually, I have a little bit of a self-belief that a lot of people are really good at starting businesses, and then they become the limiting factor of that business growing. Like, I don't know, let's say you have a little local chain of like nice grocery stores or something. At a certain point, you got that to a scale where your skills got it to, but actually you now need someone with a different mindset who might be more operational and detail focused, who's going to scale that from, say, the 5 stores you have to 50 stores. And I think people don't like letting go of the control. This is a great book on this called From Barbarians to Bureaucrats. It's like one of my favorite books I reference all the time. It's got a really great model for this. It describes how there's different archetypes of people you have at different stages of the company. So you start out with the prophet, who effectively comes down from the mountains with a story around a vision for the world that they want to create. And they use that story as kind of like capital, like emotional capital, to attract a bunch of barbarians who just run around and like the chaos and like do the first version of something. And they're like, yeah, we did one. And then they attract some builders like, oh, they've done something interesting. Like, let's see if we can, I don't know, build them some tools to make it slightly better. And then the builders attract administrators like, okay, well, let's do a process so we can train more people to do this. The administrators attract bureaucrats who start to manage the process of building processes. And then they eventually attract like the aristocrats who kind of come in and, you know, just play politics all day. But it's like everyone is at different stages of that life cycle around where they can add value and what they enjoy. You know, some people love the chaos. I know lots of people who would hate the chaos, and it would just be the worst job ever if everything was on fire all the time. I think it's rare to have the ability to deal with all of those different points of the curve.
What would you describe yourself as the most? Would you be a bit of a, you know, do you like the chaos? Do you like 1 foot in the chaos, 1 foot out of it? Where do you sit on that?
So I'm definitely a prophet barbarian. And like the thing that the skills that I know I'm good at is I can get the first version going. I can attract that core team. And that's really kind of almost the strategy I'm trying to lean into right now is get the first version running, get the team, and then try to hand it over to them and let them run it. And that's what I'm trying to move into is kind of my next kind of chapter of being an entrepreneur. That's the game I want to play. Because the thing about that model, which I think is an interesting insight, is that you work well with someone who's +1 or -1 from you at that point in the scale. So I'm a profit barbarian. I can work with builders okay, but administrators, I start seeing it like when I get down to bureaucrats, it's like I just cannot work with you. And it's not that they're not smart, capable, intelligent people. It's just we're wired differently, and you're talking across purposes nearly all of the time. And the same way, it would drive them insane working with me. And then it's knowing that, and then like having people that you trust, who, you know, if I can get a builder that I trust, they can work with the administration. Like, cool, yeah, I know that you have this, and you're going to scale it to the next stage.
How long have you been in startup life, and overall, how do you find it?
Yes, so I built my first website when I was 13. I had one that was the 1,000th most visitors when I was 16. Then I got into like eBay affiliate marketing, and I did like SEO for small businesses, website building for small businesses. And so it's entrepreneurship, but it's more kind of service-based. I had something and I was doing it. And then I kind of really got into startups properly when I worked at the Barclays Textiles Accelerator. And that for me was a really eye-opening experience because I got to witness firsthand what it was like to actually build a business with a team, with funding, with like business plans and like actual plans, as opposed to just like building for the enjoyment of building and like understanding how the system works. And when I was there, I realized that everyone that builds a financial services company is really an accountant type. And why I mean by that is that they look at the world through the lens of a spreadsheet. And actually, and kind of a previous chapter has been focused on this insight, which was that everyone who starts those companies, they don't understand the real value of the financial services in the quality of life improvement. Like nobody goes out looking for a mortgage. They look for the ability to buy the home they want. And that sounds like it might be circular, but if I spin it another way, if you could buy a home that was, you know, a 2-bedroom house rather than a 1-bedroom house, and it cost you an extra £100 a month, most people would probably take that deal. Even if the £100 a month was a better long-term financial investment for them, because you can't weigh up that quality of life so easily. And I think that's the bit where, so that was my exposure to startups and kind of got me into financial services startups, because the gap that I saw was that if you build products that actually cater to people's real needs, as opposed to competing on, oh, we're a credit card with 2% rather than 3%. Like it's a zero-sum game. And what's interesting, I think, about financial services startups is that they are startups on hard mode. There is no such thing as IP in financial services. You operate in the same very clear, rigid regulatory framework. And so it's a very pure form of business, because the spaces you can compete in are very, very small. It's, you know, better customer experience, better operational efficiency, which allows you to offer lower rates, or, you know, finding edges and gaps in regulation that don't exist, or like fundamentally rethinking things. And it's why I think that those who've heard of the PayPal mafia, the kind of people who founded PayPal that then went on to found, I think it's like 30 billion pounds plus of companies, probably more if you. And that's excluding Elon Musk, right? Who was one of them. It's like it's insane levels of, because they all had to build like one of the hardest companies there is, which is a consumer-facing financial services business.
I believe you had one startup before Wayhome.
Yes.
Again, financial services.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that startup and what led to Wayhome, and then we'll go from Wayhome to what you're doing now.
Yeah. So after working at Techstars, I got offered to kind of join two companies as co-founder, and I turned them both down for different reasons. One, it was the moral direction they wanted to take the company, and the other one was I didn't believe their business strategy. So I did my own thing, which was started out in the kind of personal money management space. The idea being that everyone looks at their bank account and they get a spreadsheet of just like rows and rows of data. And as a human being, you switch off because you can't pass that. But actually, if you could reframe it to add a quality score. So what you had there was quantities. I'm spending, and like the good personal finance apps, like, oh, you spent £100 on groceries. Like, is that actually that useful? I don't think so, because it lacks quality. And the way to solve that is, okay, how do you add a quality score? Well, what's quality for spending? How it improves your life? And so the thinking was you'd have both a quantity and a quality score. Quality score would be, how happy did that spending of that money made you? So spending money on bank interest fees would be the least happy thing you can do, because nobody enjoys giving money to a bank. And the most happy thing would be, I don't know, spending money on your hobby, or spending time with friends and family, or dinner with your partner. And then showing you how well you're spending your money, because if you can say, hey, actually, you're spending a lot of money on this thing that you've told us doesn't make you happy, let's cut that out. Like, I don't know, everyone makes the joke of millennials spending money on coffee and avocado toast. It's like, well, actually, does it make you as happy as going every day out for lunch to get a Pret sandwich versus one date night a week with your partner? I'd say for most people that one date night a week with a partner would make them happier. And it's like, well, it's not that you cut out all spending. It's like, well, take that money, put it here, and now you can reduce your spending, but also still have a good life. And I think that was the angle anyway. We got product market fit as in customers wanted it, but I just couldn't make the business model stack up. Open banking wasn't where it was back then, and it just the cost to get that kind of business up of, you acquire a customer for £20 and then you can maybe make £1 a month off them. Like it's really hard, and then they churn off. Like it's just hard. I think I was doing, again, I'd do something around using that as lead gen for something like lending and other products. But yeah, that was that one. So then wrapped that up and started Wayhome. The idea behind that was that there are millions of people who can afford to rent the home they want, but they can't afford to buy. And that's because a bank will lend you 4.5 times your income, and you can typically rent something that's 8 to 12 times your income. And so you have this gap where you need an impossible deposit to solve it. And so the insight that we had there is that you don't need to own 100% of the home to get all of the benefits of home ownership. You want the security knowing your landlord's not going to kick you out. You want the freedom to paint the walls, furnish it as you want, have a pet. And you want to know that you're not pouring money down a black hole each month on rent. It's quite a simple problem at its core, but how you solve it is very difficult. And so what we ended up building was effectively, instead of buying 100%, you'd buy 5. So even a £500,000 house, that's 25k deposit. You'd pay rent on the remainder. So your monthly rent payments are going down. And over time, you'd buy more, pay less rent, and get closer to mortgage and buyers out. So we weren't trying to replace a mortgage. We were trying to replace renting while saving for a mortgage. And a good example, I think we'll paint this very clearly, was one of our early customers was a teacher and a freelance graphic designer. Household income was good, both skilled people. Because one of them was a freelancer, the bank would totally underweigh his income. And so the thing is, they had been renting a 2-bedroom flat, and they had like a 9-year-old little girl, and it was a good house. But they couldn't afford to buy that kind of house. They could afford to buy a 1-bed that would have been out of the school's catchment area. And so they're faced with this possible decision. Do we stay renting, where we feel like we're wasting money every month, where the landlord can kick us out, which doesn't feel like our home? Or do we put our little girl out of school, away from her friends, to buy a house where she's not going to have a bedroom? Like, that's an impossible decision. And the thing is, getting that mortgage would be financially the better call. But that's my point around how accountant types don't understand the real emotional value, because they were comparing it to a mortgage, whereas we are saying, actually, we're better than renting while saving for a mortgage. And that's what I mean. There's so many gaps that exist in the marketplace. I mean, there's one of my favorite companies is Lemonade, the kind of insurance company in the US, where they take that same first principles approach to how do you design insurance in a way that better aligns incentives. Yeah, so that was Wayhome. Started about 6 years ago now, I think 5-6 years. It's a blur. And I exited in December.
Do you know what I like about here? Yes, it's financial services, but it's that human element to it. That story that you've just said there, it's so pure and so real, and it can be copy and pasted into many family situations up and down the country. And that's what I love about it. And I think, obviously it's been successful for yourself, but yeah, real problems instead of number problems on a spreadsheet is perfectly put. And you exited that company, and what did you do next? I heard there was sunshine on the horizon.
Yeah. So, I mean, it took a while to I'm still a shareholder there, and it's still it's still a business. They're about to raise a nice big chunky round of money. 100 employees. So it's all going very well. But I wanted to go back and start all over again, do the 0 to 1, the building barbarian chaos stuff. But I knew I wanted to have a little bit of a kind of an end of chapter experience. Just like this had been a big part of my 20s, was building that. And so I ended up going to Nicaragua for 3 months, which is a very random country. It's probably one of the least touristy places out there. But I ended up going because I had I lived in San Francisco about 8 years ago, and some friends of a friends all decided during COVID to work remotely in Hawaii. And then like a similar group of those people said, hey, we want to do Costa Rica, but then they looked to Costa Rica versus Nicaragua. Like, Nicaragua is a lot cheaper. So I ended up in Nicaragua for 3 months in an Airbnb looking out over the ocean with a bunch of other smart, interesting people. And one bit of advice, go try work remotely for a few months if you can, get it from your work. Like, it is a great experience. It just, you see so much of the world, and like, I'm going to sound very very privileged when I say this, but I had 3 months where I didn't do my washing or cook for myself once, because just we were paying the locals that we'd hired very, very well. Like, they were getting kind of top 10% national salaries for looking after us, and we got a great experience for 3 months where the people who were working could really heads down and work because they weren't dealing with all the other things. And I got a lot of time. Well, no, I got some time surfing on a beach and hanging out in the sun. Hence the tan. Normally, I'm a lot paler than this.
Beautiful. And would you say it was like a holiday? Did you have time to relax, or were you just thinking of the next thing? Or how long did it take until you were thinking of the next thing?
So I went out there trying to work out what that was, and like, I had a long list of things, like maybe I want to write a book, maybe I want to go BVC, like, I was very broad about what I wanted to do. Then I sat there and I kind of really started thinking, and there's a quote that one of a good friend Dan has, which is, I'm probably going to forget exactly how it's phrased, but something like, a master in the art of living makes no distinction between his work and his play. And that quote really resonates with me, because I realized that actually building companies does not work for me. It really isn't. Like, after about a month of surfing, I got really bored. And I just started reading business books because I find that interesting. It is like a hobby to me of learning those skills. And I think a lot of people put a value judgment into how much you work. But I think if you strip everything back, where you allocate time just shows you where your values are. If you are someone that values health and fitness, you'll find the time to go to the gym. If you're someone that values personal relationships, time with family, you'll prioritize time for that. If you're someone that values kind of their career and their progression, they will put time into that. And I think we judge ourselves based on society's and other people's standards. And it's like, actually, I am a very happy man working on my business, going to the gym, and, you know, doing an hour of 90 minutes of socializing with other people each day. Like, that is enough for me. Like, I'm a simple creature. I don't need more than that. But I wanted to sit with that and make sure that was true. And the time in Nicaragua really let me kind of appreciate that was it. And so after like a month, I then spent another month reading business books, thinking about the criteria of what I wanted my next thing to be, working out what that vision was that I wanted for the next chapter. And then I kind of started building in the kind of last month of that.
Yeah. So it took a month for the bug to come back. Is that what you say?
Yeah. I mean, I could have jumped straight back in, but I wanted to make sure that I was not rushing and that I wanted to feel the discomfort and make sure that it wasn't just me shying away from something that I wasn't ready to focus on.
What were the feelings around starting again? Was it just the process, or was there sort of deeper feelings as be like, oh, I'm starting this again, you know, is this the right thing? What were the feelings around it?
So I think more of the more challenging feelings was actually leaving Wayhome. So I'm not someone who's good at endings, and that I need to work out why that is. Probably something about not like being rejected and not feeling good enough. I think there's a lot of every entrepreneur has a hole in them that they try to fill somehow, and I think that's probably mine. But the thing about leaving Wayhome was it was a big chapter, and it was that kind of letting go was the hard thing there. But then starting all over, it was fun. It was the things I said at the very beginning. It was building things and working out how the system works. And it was 6 weeks from buying the domain to first revenue. And kind of, so the goal and the strategy that I kind of settled on over those first 2 weeks is my previous company, Wayhome, was VC backed, raise a pile of money, kind of swing for the fences, going to be a unicorn, and it will be, because like it's a real problem, massive market, good core fundamentals, counter-cyclical to other financial products. Like it's going to work. But this one, I was like, I didn't want to be in a position where I was trying to compete with myself in a toxic way, because I felt that if I did another VC-backed thing, it's not that I couldn't do that, but that in my head, there'd be some part of me that's comparing it to what I'd done previously. And it's not that I want to do that, but, you know, I'd like to have a gap between. And so the strategy I decided on was the path of going down VC. I think some companies do need that. Wayhome needed it. We had to spend eye-watering, so like literally eye-watering sums of money on lawyers. Like the amount of stuff we had to do on tax, it's just, very difficult. There's no way you could bootstrap at all. Like categorically, no way you could bootstrap that business. And so this time around, I said, okay, well, I did a business where I sold a lot of it along the way. What about a business where I maintain 100% ownership, be 100% shareholder? Because when you are the sole shareholder, there is no admin to deal with investors, with board updates, with reporting to them. You have the freedom to spend your time building the business. And the kind of strategy I'm trying to build over the next chapter, however long that will be building a portfolio of these businesses where I'm 100% shareholder. I get it to 0 to 1, hire the team in for 1 to 10, set them up, give them good profit share. Because I think a lot of companies give equity away. And in reality, what people actually want is they want a share of the financial upside. What they don't, no one actually really wants to have 1% of a company's decision-making power, which is really what shareholder, or like representation of 1%. Like if you have good, honest people running a business and they have a good, honest, fair profit share scheme, that is 89% of the value of what people want when they get equity. And it gives me the freedom to make decisions, move fast as the owner of the business. And I don't have to deal with the admin that goes alongside that. So the plan is to build a portfolio of these businesses where I spend, 2 years, let's say, building each one up to a point that it's self-sustaining and it's running, and hand over to a team. And so the business that I've started is, I like to say it's probably the most boring business in the world. But I do think boring businesses are great businesses. It's also super niche. Same thing, I think niche businesses are great businesses. And it's high margin. And it's, it's one where there's not a lot of competition. So you can come in and just apply good product design, good marketing, good customer experience, good systems, and build a business that will last.
It can be as boring as anything, but if it does the job and it solves the problem, then who's going to really care? But I like your point there where you're 100% ownership. You can kind of mold each one into your vision of how you want it to be. I'm speaking as well. I've done this before. I haven't done that. So I'm very early stage on my journey. But, outside looking in, it's like you own the whole show.
Mm-hmm.
You can pick the actors. You can pick the screenplay. You can be the puppet master of what you want. And I think that's beautiful to do, because I see a lot of founders, and I've spoken to a lot of founders, that they give away large chunks of their business, and it's like you're very diluting what you have. 20% for very small amounts of money is like, what you doing? It's like try and keep as much as you can until the point where it's either you're happy with it and it's doing it's the machine's going, or you need a bit of capital just to get to the next hurdle. I think too many founders rush into that sort of VC, here's 20%, let's go, and it's like really lowering what you're doing.
The one caveat I would put in there, though, is that Wayhome raised a lot of VC capital, and that gave me a lot of money to I paid myself a decent salary, and I spent a lot of that actually just on personal development and like learning and coaching and books. And you have money at scale to play the game with of building a business. So the caveat being, if it's there, it's not the end of the world, because the benefit of being an entrepreneur is that you can play this game until you're literally 70 if you want that.
It's very true, and some do. Some, some never get rid of the bug. They just keep going and going and going.
Exactly.
Because they just love this lifestyle. Bit on some quick facts of the new startup. It's Lease Extensions. Yeah. Do you want to just talk a bit more about that one? Yeah.
So for those that don't know, there's two ways you can own a home in the UK. One is freehold, the other one is leasehold. Freehold means you own the property and the land forever. Leasehold means you have a long-term rental contract. 95% plus of flats are leasehold. And so what that means is that over time, that lease that you buy with a mortgage, it's, let's say 120 years, that gets shorter and shorter, and it gets less valuable. It costs more to extend. Fewer banks will lend a mortgage on it, and eventually gets to zero. That property will revert to the person who owns the land. So at some point, you have to pay to extend it. Now, paying to extend it is a long, complex, costly, stressful process. It's 6 to 9 months. You're dealing with someone who, as a freeholder, is effectively an investor most of the time, and they're trying to effectively maximize their own financial return by getting you to pay them as much money as possible. And you're looking at, even at the cheapest end, like £6,000 up to 50, 60, £100,000, depending on how short the lease is. Like, it's a lot of money you have to pay out of pocket. Now, it is value additive, as in you pay, say, £10,000, your property will be worth at least £10,000 more. But most people don't have that kind of money sitting around. And so what we're offering is a kind of a one-stop shop service where we do it all. You sign up, we'll give you an instant online estimate by doing a lot of smart data magic in the background. And then The vision is that we can get to a place where we can just offer you real-time credit that's secured against the value of your home, so that rather than it's like, oh, this long complex process that's going to take me a lot of time and money and stress, sign this one-page contract, great, we'll get started. It's going to cost you £200 a month until you decide to sell or you pay off the debt we've lent you. And so it just totally shifts it from this big thing to, oh, it's being handled, and in 6 months' time there'll be some paperwork at land registry that's done, but I don't have to worry about it anymore. So yeah, it's a super boring business, but the angle that I like about it is that whilst the business itself might be boring, I like the challenge of trying to build a great place for people to work. And so the goal with this one here is in 12 months from launch, get to £1 million of revenue.
Again, like you said before, you may say it's a boring business, but it is solving a problem. That's at the end of the day, that's the important thing. And you touched there, you're building the internals of the business, like the culture and things like that. Is that very high priority on your list of getting these businesses right?
Yeah. It's the more I play this game, the more it's people is everything. It really is, and it's kind of my tweet about this a few years ago. It's like, there's kind of like 4 or 5 things I look for. So one is you want missionaries over mercenaries. You want people who are there for the right reasons, and the right reasons are basically ones that aren't self-interested. Whether that's they're really passionate about the mission, they really want to like help this team grow. They're not just there because it's going to look good on their CV and they get that pile of money one day. Then you want people who've done it before. I think, and because I think the challenge is if you're starting a business, you are putting a risk. You have a pile of risk you're dealing with. Hiring junior people, unless there is a clear scope for junior work, where it's like, we have this one thing that's just like, we need someone junior to do, you're adding risk, because now you have to train this person to do something they've never done before. Whereas you want someone that you can just come and it's like, yeah, seen that 4 times. This is what we do. I know the playbook, push. Then the other one is you want someone that has a network of people that if they face a problem that is generally unique, they're like, oh, I have 5 people I can call who will help me solve this problem. And then finally, just people who are nice, honest people. Like my friend Sebastian has a really good way of framing it, which is a good team is a team where you spend all week really like pushing for a deadline. Like you've got this big client project and you push all day and it's Friday, 6, 7 p.m. and you finally get it done and shipped out. And then you'll want to go and like get dinner or go get a drink. Like you don't want to immediately leave this bunch of people you've been like really cooped up with for the last week. And when you've been in those work environments, you realize how special they are. Because it smooths everything out, and so there's no room for people with ego, and the last one is one that I stole from the Navy SEALs, which is like the way they frame it is, would I trust you with my wife on deployment? Which, however you want to say it, it's like, do you trust this person? Like, maybe a more kind of sensible, like, would I trust this person? It was like, hey, I don't know, here's $5,000 in cash, can you look after it for a month? And you know that even if they got mugged, they pay you back. That's almost how I think about it.
Some great pillars for team culture there, and just the environment. I think it's brilliant. Has anything surprised you the most about this whole entrepreneurship bubble that we seem to be in?
So there's 2 competing points of view I have on this. So one is, I don't think anyone, so no one grows up thinking I'm going to be an employee. Right? That's something that society guides us towards, and and I'm not saying like there's a big person at the top trying to control it. I just think that enough people are employees that it becomes the norm, and people don't like to deviate from the norm. But if you look historically, employment was not the standard way. Most people, it would be a family business, or you'd be working a farm, and whilst you might have a landowner, it would be your farm. So I think that on one side, I don't think entrepreneurship is a thing that you're born with. I do think there are people that are more wired to it than others. And I think that's more like psychological and also like a little bit of genetics. So I did my DNA analysis 23andMe, and what's really interesting, if you have done that, is that there's a load of companies you can upload that data to, and they'll give you additional insights. One of the ones that I took it to, they analyzed it, and there was this section on like your kind of how your genes affect your mindset and your worldview. And there was like 5 or 6 genes about your levels of fear. And all of mine were on the lowest end of the spectrum. So like all the possible genes that they have studies for that impact your perception of fear are all basically turned off. And I think that's why I can deal with the chaos, because I don't get stressed by it. I'm like, okay, we have 1 month of funding left. Cool, okay. Like, I'm worried that there'll be people that I will have to look after personally, because, you know, all of the, but for myself, it's like, oh, okay, cool. Like, I'm still going to go to sleep tonight. And so I think that whilst there's a lot of a bubble here, I think there's a lot of people who are great builders and great barbarians who think they need to be the prophet. And I think that's a trend that I'm seeing more of, is that entrepreneurship is sexy right now. But what is not sexy is there were, you know, 4 or 5 years of my life where I counted every penny, where I would go to Tesco someday with like 50p and be like, cool, I need to survive off this. And that side doesn't get glamorized, but people only see me here after literally like 15, 16, 17 years worth of working every single weekend. And they see this, they're like, oh, well, I can get there. And it's like, yeah, you can, but you might be more comfortable being employee number 2 or 3.
Yeah. It's a good point you made there about 50p in Tesco, because I was reading, where was it? I think it was one of Forbes articles a few years ago, and they said, early stage startups, if you're doing your cash flow, make sure you budget in instant noodles. And I just thought that just summed it up perfectly. It's like, I've got enough for 4 packets this week. But brilliantly put. And Joseph, has there been any advice? You've said a lot of great quotes in this already, but has there been any advice that's really stuck with you and you really, you know, mission that every day?
So I think one for me is the idea of seeking oracles. And so what an oracle is it's something that's a source of truth. And I think you can find that from 2 things. So one is physical reality, and the other is the wisdom of crowds. So, you know, if you can run a certain distance in a certain time, that is a fact of physical reality. You cannot change the laws of the universe. If you've been sleeping well, if you've been eating, you've been doing your training, you'll hit that time. If you haven't, your time will go up. And I think and then if you look at the wisdom of the crowds, I think entrepreneurship is that. It's where it relies on the fact that you can create value for a large enough number of people. And yes, you can fake it to make it by being Theranos and raising silly money and smoke and mirrors. But I think the Buffett quote sums it up best, which is the stock market is a short-term popularity machine, but long-term weighing machine. And I think the way to think about life is you should structure it in a way that you're surrounding yourself by as many oracles for the things that matter as possible. You know, things like Twitter followers. If you're creating valuable content, or, you know, YouTube or whatever it is, your followers will go up. If you are, you know, trying to diet and your weight goes down, your weight has gone down. You can't fake that. And I think the challenge is trying to really sit there and think, okay, what are the things that matter to me? And how do I make sure that there are sources of truth that are going to be unbiased and true? And I think one of the best ones, if you can find them, are honest and great, true friends who will call you out on your bullshit. And ideally a partner that does the same. Seek oracles.
Yeah. And I love when you know, when you just talk something so passionately about something and you're just like really into it, and then someone plays devil's advocate. It's like, I like that person. They're the person I want you to come along with a pin and burst that bubble so I can be humbled and grow and move on.
Yeah, because we're optimists, right? We wouldn't be entrepreneurs if we weren't optimists.
Very true. Joseph, this has been Founder Sessions, and thank you so much for coming on. Learned a lot. Lastly, would you like to tell the people watching and listening where they can connect with you, what they should check out?
Yeah. So I'm trying to grow my Twitter following. So if you follow me on Twitter, which is at Josef Wasinski, that's Joseph spelt Josef. There's a funny story about what that's named after. And then Wasinski, which is was in ski for English words, Wasinski.
Fantastic. Do you want to share that story on the podcast about your name or no?
I'll talk to you afterwards, and I'd love to see if anyone can DM me and guess it.
There's your challenge for anyone watching or listening. Go follow Joseph and give him your great answers. But yeah, Joseph, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast today. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. Have a good one.